Okay, cool. So I am MT, and I'll be commentating the very first match of the NieR Automata Speedrun Tournament year 2018, aka Nasty 18 double elimination tournament. We have 16 players, and this is our very first match. So if you want to check out the bracket, you can go to, I believe,
everything that lives is designed
tourney.nierspeedrun.com.
trapped in a never-ending
if you want to check out the brackets. Let's see, for those of you who don't know, Kanaris is the world record holder for this category, so he's coming in as the #1 seed. So it goes without saying, Dan Flesh has a bit of a hill to climb, but anything can happen. Soft locks are a thing, crashes are a thing with this game.
This is Command. Yorha Squadron, come in.
So we'll see.
Here. All units have penetrated the stratosphere. Autopilot systems green across the board.
This is Operator 60. All units confirmed.
And it's a bit late where I am, so apologies if I don't explain some basic things or keep it a little bare bones, but if you have any questions, feel free to ask in chat.
Understood. H down. All units activate manual mode and rely on visuals to evade.
Already engaged.
So coming in here to Prologue, this is just about a 4.5 minute Shmup section. There aren't a lot of optimizations here. There's some minor AI manipulation stuff going on, but overall the main thing is you will see them change to weapon set 2. You have 2 possible weapon sets. Each weapon set, you have 2 weapons equipped. You can equip a weapon in your light slot and your heavy slot, and you have a light attack button and a heavy attack button. Once you get into the proper sort of 3D hack and slash, typical Platinum game style. So you'll see them switch to weapon set 2 right away, and that's because weapon set 2 has the short sword in the heavy slot, and that sort of the bread and butter of combat is you do a dash and then a heavy attack, and 2B will throw out the short sword, it'll spin around, it hits a lot of times, and for whatever reason it does about 5 times the amount of damage of the other attacks. So you'll see that a lot once we get into the 3D section of this game. And then later on, they will not only do that with the 1 weapon set, but they'll edit weapon set 1 to be the same as weapon set 2, so they'll throw a sword out, change weapon sets, and then throw out another sword. Changing the weapon sets does not remove the sword that you already threw out and is spinning around, so you're basically just throwing out a spinning sword, changing weapons, throwing out one more.
Captain, I think...
And I just want to get that out of the way, that's sort of the basis of combat. And then there's some other stuff that we'll do with slow-mo. You have a little pod that follows you around, and that pod has a special attack. The default one that you start with is a big laser, but if you hold down that button, it will sort of charge up the laser, but it has the side effect of slowing everything down around 2B. So that will also be used a lot in combat, just to sort of manipulate the boss's attack cycles, stuff like that. So we see Kanaris taking damage here. He's just doing this just to get rid of some recovery items. The less recovery items you have, you start with 3 different types. So if you get rid of some of those, that it makes it so you have less inputs to use melee buffs later on. So it's just saving a bit of menuing inputs here. And then just to mention, for the Shmup sections, most of the time you'll see them just holding down pod fire and spamming the light attack button. You have light attack and heavy attack in the Shmup sections, just like you do in the 3D sections. But most of the time, just spam pod fire, and just good positioning with light attacks is all that you need. So these first enemies here are what we call stubbies. They're actually one of the more frustrating. That was actually a very, very good wave there by Kanaris. Stubbies can do this attack that we call whirly arms, where they just sort of flail their arms around, and it's incredibly annoying. It lasts for a very, very long time, and if you're close to them and you try and do a dash, you will instead do an evade. And in order to do our basic combat stuff, which is doing a dash and then a heavy attack, if there's an enemy attack around you when you do a dash, you do an evade instead. So it's the enemy's choices of attacks can really lose you a significant amount of time sometimes. So coming here on this first, what we call Marks 1, all you have to do is damage it down to about half health as fast as you can, and then you have this little time sequence where you're downloading your pod program, which is what I was referring to earlier, the big laser that you'll see. So coming up here to crane skip, just with sort of some fancy aerial movement, you can skip a small intended section of the game in order to lower that, lower some platform or something.
Do it.
Exit confirmed closed.
So open.
So we've got the same thing here, just a bunch of stubbies. You see Kanaris. If you see the pod, if you see that little three-pronged icon over top of it, that means that slow-mo is active, and he's using that just so those enemies really can't do anything. They can't attack. They can't jump backwards. Jumping backwards is another big thing that enemies will do. They'll just kind of jump backwards and evade your attacks. And using a laser there just to finish off the last two in one attack instead of having to do both individually. Coming up here on bridge skip, this is the hardest skip in Prologue. You have to do a very specific sequence of inputs in order to get enough height to land on top of that bridge. Normally you have to go farther in the map and hit a switch or something to lower the bridge, but it is possible to get enough height just to make it on top of that and make it over that gap. So you saw an out of bounds there. Walls in this game are definitely more of a suggestion than an actual rule. So usually you kind of just put yourself in a corner and then you will do... There are a few possible attacks that you can use that will sort of give you enough forward momentum to clip out of bounds. So dealing with these sort of medium biped shielded enemies, you have to do like a specific amount of damage. Oh, very nice. You have to do a specific amount of damage to the shield before the shield breaks, and then you have to damage the enemies themselves. So those, you can lose a lot of time on those larger shielded enemies, but
I surveyed the entire factory.
Great job by
Couldn't find anything
Kanaris.
resembling our target.
looks like he is going to do a strat here where instead of going around the side, he does a plunge over the top of that sort of industrial thing, and that saves less than a second, but it looks really cool. And that's also, I think, the first instance of what we call a double lift. If you press jump and heavy attack right afterwards, you'll do sort of like a uppercut attack, like a lifting attack. If any enemies nearby, they will get lifted up as well, and that's
I wouldn't bet on that.
one of the main ways to gain height in this game. But if you do that into a slope, you will sort of do the lift, but you'll touch the ground again, and that'll cause the game to think that you become grounded, and it'll let you use a second lift. So that's used in a few places just to get the needed height. And then this second little Marks fight here, you saw him throwing out some swords as the saw was sort of moving across the ground there, and that's just so he could get enough damage on it so that he could damage it down to that threshold without having to use a buff item. There are melee buff and range buff items in this game that you'll see used a lot later, but that does cost some menuing time, so it's good to avoid that whenever possible. So coming up here to angles on Kanaris' side of the screen, this segment, this first phase is completely timed. So the attacks that he does at this point don't really matter. Kanaris just taking some damage. Basically, you're just going to wait for a very specific point in the music, and then you're going to pause and skip the cutscene. I should mention with the cutscenes, usually what you do is you can pause during them and then press A to skip them, or you can hold B unpaused to skip them. And you'll actually need to do both because we'll do some self-destruct strats later, right before cutscenes. And when you do that, you can't pause the game. You have to just hold B instead. And it's a little slower, but not by too much. So Kanaris here just using some slow-mo
This is the target.
and throwing out swords just to get some damage on angles here. You don't need to do a ton of damage. You just want to get him down to a certain threshold to where his life bar will disappear.
Incoming enemy attack.
Looks like Kanaris got lucky there, or he didn't get unlucky. I should say there's one attack out of 6 that angles can do that loses a lot of time. If he does that long multi-punch attack, that loses a lot of time compared to all of the other possible attacks that he can do, so. Looking pretty good for Kanaris so far. And we'll see what kind of luck Danflesh gets. Kanaris just showing off a bit of the movement options, the aerial options that you have in this game. You do have a lot of vertical and like horizontal movement options in this game, which is very nice.
9S
It's definitely one of the positive things about speedrunning this game, or one of the fun things. Here's another double lift right here, just to skip going around. And I didn't see what Danflesh got, but he didn't get punches, so that's good. It's coming up to what we call ninjas, where stubbies just drop from the sky from somewhere. This section can be kind of tricky. Kanaris having a bit of trouble here. Not too bad, you still get a good lead. And then this final section, this is also... It's timed, you're waiting until 2B says a certain bit of dialogue, and then Ingalls will throw out a scripted punch that will change to the next phase. So there is a bit of luck here when it comes to what attack Ingalls chooses to do when when we reach that point in the dialogue. If he just starts a very long attack when that bit of dialogue starts, then you can lose a pretty good amount of time. But when 2B says, "I told you to shut up," from that point onward, that's where Ingalls can do his little scripted punch. Danflesh getting that double lift second try. It is a little tricky. You can't press heavy attack on the same frame as jump, I don't believe, but you don't want to wait too long.
Control. Upper arm. Seized from enemy unit. Marking weak
Danflesh having a pretty good ninjas, throws out a damage glitch, does a laser, and has to do like one more. That's pretty good.
Seize its control system.
Affirmative. Infiltrating enemy subunit. Behavior table adjusted. Balance
And then on this last phase here,
enemy unit subjugation complete.
you have to hit him with 3 heavy attacks, but luckily, as soon as you press heavy attack, you can evade, and that will allow you to use another heavy attack as soon as you want. So usually when you swing the arm and hit him, there's this long like attack animation, but using the dash button or the evade button, you can use the attack again whenever you want.
Nothing for.
And then from here, we're just doing some text mashing and just going through some just like basic setup for some settings. We got brightness, we got character voice volume, and self-destruct. So not much going on here.
Ma'am? All right. Okay. One.
Mention on the Ingles fight that Dan Flesh is about to do, it is possible to, if you do an attack, you press evade to like cancel the cooldown or like whatever. If you press, there's like 1 or 2 frames, or if you press heavy attack again, you'll damage him. You'll get like a double hit and do twice as much damage, which is 1 punch. Yeah, he was going for it there. He attacked a little too early, so unfortunately he did lose some time there. But I definitely respect him going for that. Kanar's here. He's talking to 9S and walking forward. He's walking into a dialogue trigger, and when you have your NPC, your partner's dialogue up, and you walk into a dialogue trigger, it will cancel that dialogue trigger. So he just skipped some dialogue, and during those dialogue sections, 2B is forced to just walk very, very slowly. So you'll see that in a few places where we will bring up NPC dialogue in order to skip some longer dialogue.
Hey, 2B, why do you think they sent a combat model like you to a recon job? If all they want is intel, we scanner models are built for that kind of thing.
Orders are orders.
All right, all right.
So you see all those missiles? That
You're going
is
to have some new weaponry installed
the
from
equivalent
now
of the
on.
laser
I'll have instructions for you. Make
between
sure to
the
keep an
3D sections and the Shmup sections. It's same thing. It's sort of your pod special attack, just in the Shmup sections. So that's kind of used to, on certain waves, just if you can kill them immediately with that, it's a good thing to do. You'll see it used again in the next wave. There are these 2 multi-pronged enemies that we like to call fidget spinners, because they have this really annoying attack where they spin around very quickly, and you can't.
2B, come in. I've set a
You
landing
get
point
hit to
in
them,
5 minutes.
or you get hit
We'll
by
be
them
touching
when you're
down right
close,
away
but you
from
have
the
to be
resistance
close
camp,
to
unfortunately.
do max
Sorry for
damage.
the
So
trouble, but we
it's
can't risk the enemy discovering
you're basically
our
just getting
position.
screwed by luck.
Understood.
But
Good luck down there.
you can take one of them out right away with that missile attack, whatever you want to call it. I kind of think of like the Shmup and the 3D sections. They have like the same like attack options. Like you have light attack, heavy attack, evade, pod fire, and then your special attack. So if I say pod program, I'm talking about the laser or the missiles. So Kanar's here, just making his way to the resistance camp. This movement that he's doing here, he's doing a dash and then a light attack with bare fists. That is just barely faster than chaining dashes together without anything else. It's a bit annoying to execute properly, but luckily we only have to do a few fetch quests, and then we can upgrade our short sword that we start with to level 2, and then instead of doing these dash punches, we will do a dash and then a sword swing, which is slightly faster than doing the dash punches. And it's much easier to time, I guess you would say. So Kanar's here picking up a quest from the item trader and a quest from the weapon trader.
This must have been quite a city once
These are
upon a
just
time.
2 little fetch quests that we're forced to do before we can progress in the main story. good news is the weapon trader quest gives you the items required to upgrade
This is 2B.
the short sword, which is the only one that you start with, and it's also the best one in the game overall. The short sword is the best for combat, and it's also very good for covering covering horizontal distance. It's very good for that as well. So
Wildlife has claimed most of the central area. Big plants too.
kind of just a lucky thing that that weapon ended up being so overpowered.
Wonder if there are any huge pores and such too.
And yes, this is loadless. Depending on your hardware, there can be. It's not like a huge difference. I'd say any given two runners are not going to be any more than like 30 seconds apart in terms of like load times. But
The Resistance is a valuable ally to your house. By helping them,
it's
we
the
also
most
help
fair way to do it.
ourselves. So no, I don't think they're a pain.
Yeah.
So Kanara's just picking up those items for the fetch quests. Has to talk to this mask lady here, and then he's going to turn this in and upgrade the virtuous contract to level 2. That is usually as far as you can go in terms of like item upgrades or like weapon upgrades. Usually all you will see is just that one upgrade to level 2, but it is possible to get the materials required to upgrade it to level 3, but it's completely luck dependent. You might see it, you might not.
Location specified by resistance leader.
Probably won't, but it is a possibility.
Marker on target. The desert heat is going to make resupply efforts difficult, 2B. Please make sure you're ready before you go.
And now Kanaris is just going to make his way to the desert, so yeah, just sort of check out the movement that he's doing. He's going to do a dash, cancel the sort of end of dash running animation with that heavy attack, and then he's going to cancel the heavy attack with another dash. So you're just kind of repeatedly chaining those together, and that is your fastest movement option outside of spear dashing, which is sort of completely different. We might see that later. I hope we do. But Kanara is definitely very, very good movement. So coming up to the desert camp here, he's just buying some items from the trader. He's buying just medium recoveries. He's buying melee and range buffs. Buying some animal bait for later, and he bought a chip, the resilience chip. The way this game likes to do customization is that you have sort of a set amount of space for chips, and then you can put whatever chips you want in your sort of customization size, and you can switch between them, do whatever you want with that. But for this, what the resilience chip does is whenever you have more than 80% HP and you get hit, it will prevent you from being staggered or like stun locked or like anything like that. So you can continue throwing out swords. If you get hit, it doesn't matter because it's not going to interrupt your combat. So that's a big deal in quite a few places that you'll see later. He's not actually going to equip that until he goes into the forest, just to save some menuing time because it's not really necessary at this point in the game. So Canaris just went and picked up Pod C. This is a big deal because there is a glitch that you can do with the pod program laser. If you have Pod A active and you hold down laser, it will sort of charge it up, and then the second pod will come out and you get 2 lasers. But for whatever reason, if you do that when you're on Pod A, you can switch to Pod C, and Pod C is not on cooldown, so you effectively get 3 lasers instead of 2. So that gives us 3 times the amount of lasers, and if you make a mistake somehow, if you're doing slow-mo in combat and you accidentally fire the laser or something, then you have an additional pod that you can just change to and continue to use slow-mo.
What's that?
Analysis.
So that section right there,
Human residential area.
you have to wait for that enemy to burrow, and right when you see him jumping up to burrow into the sand, you plunge into the side of that rock, and that just lets you get a lot farther into where the cutscene trigger is, because you are forced to walk very slow during that. So coming up here to the desert apartments, you'll see Kanaris do a plunge to clip into this building. A plunge is just a dash and then a heavy attack when you're in the air. You move at sort of like a 45-degree angle downward very, very quickly, so plunges are very, very useful for movement. So coming up here, you're going to see him just get some horizontal distance. He has to hit a trigger out there, and then he will curve back around and plunge onto this platform to start the atom fight, or the pit fight before the atom fight. There's a trigger in the cuts in like a tunnel or something above you that you have to get before you can progress. So you can do that. You can hit that trigger and then void out and then respawn and then make it to the platform. But doing it, I guess what we call voidless, probably saves about 6 or 7 seconds. And this section is timed as well, so what Kanaris wants to do here is just kill as many of these stubbies as possible for both experience, and he wants to get chip drops as well, those plug-in chips that I mentioned earlier. He's looking to get a lot of, or not a lot of, but he's looking to get some good crit chips. He ideally wants some crit +2 chips. Critical hits in this game also do like 5 times damage, so you have damage glitch, which is throwing out the spinning sword, does 5 times damage, and then crits also do 5 times damage, so it's very, very important for bosses. And S self-destruct at the end there, just to take out some more machines before the cutscene. So here on the Atom fight, he's just going to throw out some swords. There's a little mini cutscene here that he's trying to skip, and he does very fast. And then from here, he's going to charge up a laser. Only did 1. Looks like that was all he needed. That's good. So very good Atom fight from Kanaris.
Come on, through that hole.
It's actually pretty hard to commentate a Kanaris run, just because he's so consistent at everything. It's hard to sort of keep up with everything that he's doing. So apologies for that. So now he's just making his way out of the pit. He's going to there's a box that's blocking your way. He's going to push that
Looks like we're safe now.
just enough
What the hell just happened?
to
I know.
do a pod launch and clip out of bounds in order to do what we call a save scum, since we're doing loadless. If we have an opportunity to save and load, we're going to take it, and this is one of the few places where saving and loading would possibly be faster. So he's going to do a pod launch to get out of bounds, and then he is going to make his way over to where he's within the sort of diameter of the save points range. And he has to clip out of bounds, just because if you stay in bounds, you hit a dialogue trigger that is very, very long, and at that point, it's not worth it to do a save and load. It's pretty much faster to just take the intended way.
Maybe we should.
No.
But clipping out of bounds lets you skip that dialogue trigger and just save as soon as you can and load.
Operator to 9S. Data upload complete.
Roger.
I also have an incoming message from the commander. Initiating playback. 2B, 9S. We've lost contact with several Yorha units that were on their way to the
And then
surface.
nothing here but
Their
good
black
movement
boxes are
making
online, so we
making his
presume
way
they're still
to the
alive.
amusement
We've
park.
tracked the location of their signals.
Dan
So we need
Flesh,
all Yorha units on the surface
still in
to head
Atom
over
Pit.
and investigate.
Like I said, you're just trying to take out as many of them as you can and do a
I heard something
self-destruct
about
right
that back at the
before
resistance camp.
the cutscene hits. It's timed, so just
Target
based
location
on
confirmed.
the
I'm worried about the other
the
androids.
vocal lines,
Which
you
looks
kind of
like their
know when
surface
you need to
route's been cut
self-destruct.
off. So 2B. those
So
machines
Kanaris
out in the
plunging
desert look
into
just
that
like
tunnel,
androids,
and
Right.
the thing about
But the
self-destruct
androids
is
were
it lets
modeled
you
after our
cancel
human
animations, so
creators.
you can do a
So why would
plunge and then
machines try to look like
cancel
us?
it by holding self-destruct, but
There's no point trying to
self-destruct
knock out
will keep
unsolvable
your
problems.
momentum.
I suppose.
So it's a very useful thing. You'll see that used a little later. Oh, it doesn't quite get over that cutscene trigger. It's possible to get enough height to where you can just skip over that cutscene entirely.
What the?
Wow, this is weird.
Alright, so coming up here, we have another out of bounds. You sort of just plunge through that roof. Do a couple pod spins, or 3 pod spins to get over that gap, and then make your way to the roller coaster to fight the boss.
You really think it's a good idea? to leave
Looks
our
like
stuff behind?
If they aren't hostile, fighting them is a waste
Kanaris
of time.
not going for the spear.
What's this?
Analysis. It is a device that propels humans on rails at high speeds for the purposes of amusement. It was
We'll see how
conceived as
we'll see how
a
Dan Flesh does with this box
Humans
clip.
Sure are strange creatures.
It can be a little bit tricky. It's not too bad. That's actually makes it a bit easier if you put 2B sort of right in the corner between the box and the wall, and then you just do a neutral evade, which puts you straight backwards, and then do a pod launch. It gives you a bit more time to react to when you actually clip out of bounds, because you have to cancel it with a dash to the left to not, completely clip through the box completely and back inbounds. So, sort of a tricky thing. And Kanaris just trying to kill some enemies here. Completely timed section. I believe he's level 8. I can't tell from here. It looks like he's level 8. Level 8 makes the Brevard fight here a bit easier. Fantastic boss. Unfortunately, we don't get to see
Our records don't say
Um,
anything about a machine like this.
very many attack patterns, but Kanaris just going to throw out swords here, try to damage her down to threshold as soon as possible, so that the only thing she does is sort of that spinning spike attack, and when you damage her down to threshold that quickly, she'll stay very close to the stage. She has to return all the way to that point on stage, so keeping her close saves a lot of time.
It's trying to hack us. If we take hacking
And
tickets,
finishing
it'll
up that
affect
little
our
hacking
bodies as
phase,
well.
hopefully that's the only time we'll see that, but in the section coming up, you can get caught
Are we
in
seriously
some
being
additional
attacked with
of
dead
those little
androids?
hacking minigame sections
I don't think
by these dead androids that shoot out shockwaves or projectiles. So we'll see what happens.
All right. This ends now.
that shockwave right there, it's very easy to get caught by that, especially if they decide to throw it out right as they come on screen. You have some kind of wonky camera angles there, so it can be a little difficult to avoid those sometimes. But amazing stuff by Kanaris. It's going to damage her down the threshold and then destroy some of these androids here. He's looking to get a small recovery drop. Oh, one thing about sort of these like boss areas is that the game will auto loot the items for you, so you don't have to pick them up. So that's one thing, and a self-destruct at the end there,
Oh,
right before the cutscene.
So,
And we'll see if Kanaris got any small recoveries. He did.
To say, huh? It's almost like it had actual emotion.
The machines don't have feelings. You said that yourself.
Yeah, I guess.
So getting a small recovery just makes one little trick coming up a lot more consistent or easy. You'll see it on Kanaris' side of the screen in not too long, but first he has to get to Pascal's village, so he's just gonna make his way there.
So why don't the machines, or the aliens who created them, attack the bunker directly? They originally came here from outer space, right?
Well, there are
Bit of
theories about that, but no one knows for
it's
sure.
very easy
We'll
to
have
be
check
like
what
when you're
the
very
aliens
close
think,
to
you
a
know?
ledge, you'll just barely go off the ledge and you'll do a heavy attack in an aerial state instead. There are like a lot of
They all have white flags.
sort of terrain
Looks like
items
they
where
really
like
don't wanna
it
fight.
doesn't seem like you should be in an aerial state, but there's just like a tiny little ledge that'll put you in a aerial state and make you do that heavy attack instead of, you know, doing your standard dash swinging movement. And then Danflish on Bavar here. Looks like he had a pretty good beginning too. She's right next to the stage, so that's very good. What you'll see Kanaris do here is he's going to
We can get into the
plunge
city ruins if we
above this
move
box and cancel it with a self-destruct. So that will cancel the animation that'll sort of remove the sword hitbox that sort of collides with stuff, and
Scheduled contact.
that will keep that velocity from the plunge, which makes it easier to clip through the box and the wall there. And then now you can see why we bought the animal bait before, because it is a lot faster to ride an animal back to the resistance camp than it is to walk. Not by much, but it is faster.
I am definitely not the person to discuss this with.
I don't think I can stand spending one more day in this bunker.
You leaving would be bad for me. It would affect mission efficiency.
Are you saying you need me to be?
All Model B combat.
So he went to that door to cancel that 6-0 dialogue there, so he can talk to Anemone faster. And now he has to make his way back to Pascal's village. It's just a little back and forth. You get an item from Pascal, take it to Resistance Camp. Get an item from Anemone, you have to take it back to Pascal's village.
We're not a threat?
You're
Oh, and Kanaris just died. Very unfortunate. Luckily, it's just a death warp, though, so he's still good.
Fair.
So as you saw, Danflesh did the self-destruct right before Bravora died. That's the reason why you just take a death warp back instead of having to walk all the way back to Pascal's village from Resistance Camp. Saves a lot of time.
a Goliath. This was a trap. I knew it.
I promise.
So from here, you're back at Pascal's village. You're making your way to some flight units in order to sort of defeat these city angles, or these angles that are hanging out in the city. So Kanars is just going to make his way to the flight units. He's going to have to make his way on top of some buildings. Danflesh having a bit of trouble with this movement here.
Let's find another route.
You want to avoid ladders whenever possible, just because climbing is very slow. So your typical typical combo for gaining height is a lift, a heavy attack, a jump, a heavy attack, and if necessary, you can do a self-destruct and then another heavy attack and then a dash. So lift heavy, jump heavy, self-destruct heavy. So Kanar's making his way to the Metal Gear Solid ladder. Has to do probably about 13 of these jump climbs here. And he's going to try to clip out of bounds here. Looks like he jumped a bit early, but
Be careful.
nicely done. Did a pod launch. I think that pod launch he did there saved it.
Copy that.
Not sure, but yeah, so there's sort of like an invisible wall there, but if you sort of wedge yourself against the wall and the ceiling, you can kind of clip out enough to just dash through. So yeah, we don't even have to fight that one angles at all. We could just ignore him and just use a couple pod programs on this one. He's sort of leaning forward here, so usually the missiles go out in a circle around you, but since the hitbox is weird, you just hit him with everything. It's very strong. And Dan Flesh grabbing a moose as well. I was hoping that we'd see at least one player get a boar, because there's some movement tech called boar jumping. I'm sure you can figure out the implications of that, but it is actually faster than just sprinting with an animal. You just spam jump instead. It's pretty funny. But anyway, Canaris making his way down
But it seems to be underground.
to negotiations. Right there, he just by plunging down into that section that quickly, he sort of activated this glitch that we call Skype glitch. He started sort of a dialogue section where there is some dialogue with the commander already up, and when you do that,
All these dead machines.
it basically keeps your
What is
your
this?
communication state as
Nothing like it in the
like you're constantly in the communication state. So whenever there's some new dialogue from like the bunker, be it the commander or 6-0, they'll just start talking right away instead of having to go through the like the ringing sound and all that stuff. So that does save a bit of time, and it's not really obvious, but
Wiped down.
it's kind of a big it's kind of a big deal. Skype glitch.
Machines are weapons capable of evolution. We can grow. We can become a winner.
So all that Kanars is going to do here, he's just going to kill Eve one time for experience, and then he is going to clip out of bounds to just take out some other machines for experience and maybe pick up an item or two.
Plants, I guess you'd say. They held no value to us. But the humans on the moon, now they are interesting.
Why them?
Because they are an
So he got the level up from Eve, and now he's going to let Eve attack, do an evade and a heavy attack, then do lift, heavy, jump, heavy, self-destruct, heavy, in order to get enough height to get over that barrier
drive such behavior.
and make his way
Dedicated ourselves to
to
unraveling
the
this
exit.
behavior.
He has to do another bit of aerial movement here to get over another invisible wall.
You were made in their image
And
after all.
Assist you with what?
Now what he can do is pick up a few items and get some experience from some of these enemies. Not only does he get experience, but the movement on the way back is also a lot easier because this game has auto-targeting. It has sort of a manual lock-on, and then it has an automatic lock-on as well when enemies are on camera and close enough to you. So when you're doing these dash heavies, if there's an enemy nearby, the heavy will go towards the enemy. So by taking these out, the movement on the way out is a lot easier. So while he was out there killing some of those robots, whatever, he also picked up a chest that had 3 titanium alloys. That's for later on. He could get lucky and get the materials to upgrade the virtual contracts to level 3. He may or may not be lucky, probably not, but you never know. We'll see once he goes back to the forest. He'll check the weapon trader to see if he actually got the items or not. So we see Dan Flesh was not able to get the fast version of the skip here. What he's trying to do is get a double lift off of the slope. And if he gets a double lift, he can still gain enough height to make it over that invisible wall. So instead of clipping out, you can also do it with a double lift off of one of those sloped rocks. But it can be annoying because of what Engels is doing here. He's doing a bunch of punches. Those punches can block you from getting over the invisible wall. So just sort of getting unlucky on the attack patterns here.
I'll rest if I feel like it.
But he finishes that up. So Canaris went back to the bunker, talked to the commander. Now he's going to go back to Pascal's village and make his way to the forest. This is where the second set of buys come in. So you're going to see him, I guess, check the weapon trader, see if he has the materials to upgrade the short sword to level 3. And then he is going to sell off a bunch of stuff, sell off a bunch of chips that he doesn't need, some of the HUD or the UI chips. And then he's going to buy some of the larger melee and range buffs and some more recoveries. So we'll see what he does here. He's going to sell the rest of his small recoveries and sell those machine cores. Each machine core is 10k, so it's worth a lot. He's going to sell a bunch of those HUD elements, buy a bunch of recoveries and buffs. Looks like he's not even going to bother checking the weapon trader. He's just going to go and equip his chips immediately. So there's the resilience chip, and he's looking for these crit chips. Looks like he got a decent. What did he get? He got 2 crit plus 1s and a crit plus 0. I think that's a 5% crit chance. So that's pretty good. I'd definitely be happy with that in a race for sure. It's somewhat common to just not get any attack chips at all, or not get any crit chips, or sometimes not get any chips, period.
We don't get to choose our assignments.
5% is pretty good.
Your opinions in check. Yorha aren't allowed to be emotional, remember?
I think some of us are better at that than others. This must be the commercial structure Pascal was talking about. The records say it was once a facility known as a shopping center.
Nope.
Yeah, one of those, another one of those NPC dialogue cancels there. There's normally some like 10 or 15 second dialogue there, but by opening 9S's, by opening some dialogue with 9S, he's going to cancel that dialogue and fight these 4 medium bipeds right away.
Looks like the forest is just ahead.
So Dan Flesh just dealing with negotiations right now. I'm assuming that he will try and clip out of bounds as well, just to get some more experience and clear that area out.
Here they come. Better keep your guard
So
up.
that
I'm
auto-targeting
aware,
thing
but
also
you
applies
just
to
be careful.
animals as
I
well.
will to be.
It's possible for a moose to be like right in front of you, and then if you try to do these dash swings, that the swing will actually swing towards the moose. So you really have to pay attention to where the animals are as well when you're sort of navigating from place to place.
Don't listen to what they're saying, 2B.
Nice plunge down there to the bridge. And we're coming up to what we call Rainbow Road. It's just a lot of horizontal movement in the air. He's going to do a pod spin, heavy jump, pod spin, heavy jump, pod launch, pod spin, a dash, and then another pod spin to cross that gap. You can also, there's another strat where you can sort of void out underneath the bridge and then it'll respawn you up there, but doing it without the void out is faster. And then you can sort of wedge yourself sort of beneath that vine and do a punch, and that'll let you clip out of bounds. So we don't actually have to go through any of the castle here. We just go right on the windows on the outside. Just lift, heavy, jump, repeat. And we make our way. He has to go a little bit towards this transporter to hit a require trigger to let him start the A2 fight. And then from here, he is just going to... He's going to try and get a pod launch here just to land as close to the cradle as he can. Otherwise, 2B takes a very
2B,
long time to walk up to it.
An android. A Yorha-type android.
Alert. This unit is
So this A2 fight,
But
crits help out a lot on this because she will, A2 will just randomly decide to disengage and run away and do that attack where she crosses the entirety of the ground or she attacks from the air. So you kind of want to just get lucky, get a bunch of crits, keep her sort of stun locked, like Kanars is doing right there.
But she's...
So good fight.
Let's go after her, 2B.
Very good fight. And then instead of chasing her off the castle, we're going to plunge over this invisible wall that's forcing us to go back to the left. And by doing that, we get to skip a bunch of dialogue and use this teleporter to go back to Pascal's village. Normally, if you go the intended way, it's like a minute or a minute and a half of dialogue that you have to wait for before you can use the teleporter at the base of the castle. So much, much faster to do it this way.
It'll be faster.
Let's stay sharp and head back to the resistance camp. We should run a check on our consciousness.
Kanar's picking up a skill salve in that chest. That drastically reduces the cooldown time for your pod program. So you can use lasers a lot sooner than you otherwise would. Looking at Dan Flesh, he's doing his buys right now. Looks like he is not only buying melee and ranged buffs, but he's buying defensive buffs as well. It's very easy since we're under leveled. It's very easy to die, especially later on at the end of the game. There are a lot of bosses that can kill you in 2 hits. So with those defensive buffs, your chances of dying are pretty much non-existent. So clipping out of bounds, plunging down here to get this cutscene. Looks like he got a bad frame.
Already, so I can be home in time for dinner and a bath.
Androids don't.
But that's fine. Still makes it down here to the shore. He just has to take out these 3 enemies, and then there will be another wave. There is a fidget spinner. Things can go very, very wrong if this fidget spinner chooses to take off and do some weird stuff. Kanaris, of course, is good enough to where he can almost always reliably kill it before it gets a chance to do anything.
I think
But
that's the last of the
the
machines.
inputs there are kind of tough. You have to use like slow-mo and you're mashing taunt as well as in addition to doing your like attacks. Taunt, if I didn't mention it before, if you spam your flashlight, which most people have on more than one button, the enemy will go into sort of like an enraged state, and they take 50% more damage, but they also deal 50% more damage. So on enemies like that fidget spinner, taunt is very, very important, just so that you can get rid of it before it has a chance to really do anything. And then now Kanaris is just starting Grun here. This is like a 12-minute shmup section. The section that Kanaris is on, there are some optimizations here, but a lot of it later on is just basically an auto scroller. So if you need to use the bathroom or get a drink, now's the time to do that. In fact, I'm going to do the same thing right now.
Attention, this is Carrier Blue Ridge 2. Requesting support from any friendly units in range. We've come under heavy fire from the enemy. Our escort ship has taken damage and is unable to engage. We're currently resisting with all remaining support fighters, but we can't hold them off for long. I repeat, this is Carrier Blue Ridge 2. We need immediate backup from any available android forces.
Picking up a large-scale enemy inbound. Looks to be 2.8 clicks southwest of us.
Unit destroyed. Reverting back to area recon.
Wait, I'm still picking up a large enemy presence.
Didn't I kill that already?
What on? If it's that big, we should be able to see it.
Is that a machine?
It's freaking huge.
Alright, so Kanaris took out the Goliath flyer. And that fight is basically he just buffs up, uses each pod program, spams heavy attacks, and then uses 2 more pod programs once the cooldown's over. Pretty basic fight. That's one of the only places that you can lose time at that point. Then we see Dan Flesh fighting A2 here. I didn't get a chance to see what chips he got. I'm not sure if anybody saw. But pretty good fight. Looks like she ran away once. Not too bad.
Generator target confirmed. Marking on map. Proposal: destroy the generator quickly.
And also gets over that invisible wall first try. So nicely done. That getting over that sort of it's not even quite like a wall. It's like a dialogue trigger that. It opens up dialogue, and if you're too far to the left, it forces you to walk back. So that's kind of a tricky trick to learn, a tricky trick. Wow.
Data obtained from command.
Go ahead.
So yeah, the section that Canaris is on, not much that you can do to really speed this up. There are three generators that you need to destroy, and it's very possible to lose some time on those just due to how the fights work, due to how difficult the optimal strats are, I guess you would say. Alright, so coming up to the first generator here, there are 4 outside nodes. You can only hit 2 at a time. So ideally what you want to do is destroy 2 of them before the generator rotates. So nicely done by Canaris, and then he's going to destroy these other 2 before they rotate. You just spam pod fire, and you need about 5 or 6 light attacks. It's very easy to not make it in time, to not destroy the second node before the core rotates, and you can kind of get trolled by that. Like instead of rotating by just 90 degrees, it'll rotate by like 180 degrees, so it'll basically be untargetable for like 2 cycles or 2 like rotations. It can be incredibly annoying.
Are you Yorha?
Hunter Squadron deploying out of North 12C Defense HQ. I'm the commanding officer for...
And Damflesh making his way, doing that void out to respawn on the shore saves a lot of time. We'll see how his fidget spinner goes, because that's one of the enemies that can lose you a lot of time. So we'll see what he does. It's gonna do some aerial attacks on it, lifts, heavy plunge, laser. Not too bad, pretty good. Pretty good fight. Basically, I think in a race, as long as that thing doesn't start spinning or like flying away, you're in pretty good shape.
I'll help aim.
This thing's armor is too thick. We need more firepower.
So on Canaris' side, you just have to shoot 3 of these mortars into, or charge cannon, or whatever they call this thing. You have to hit him in the mouth with 3 shots. After the first one, you can just spam shoot, so it's not too difficult. You can get trolled sometimes, but it's not too bad.
That enormous machine is an
So we're
ancient
back
weapon.
up in another Shmup section. We need to take out 2 more generators.
Wound up going out of control. I was part of the machine's network when it happened, so I
So
remember it. The moment
for the
it
first
was
generator, the
preserved
big middle
being
core
tapped
takes
everything.
2 pod programs to kill, but
No
the
one
second
could figure
2
out how to stop it.
only take one
We
pod
eventually
program to
marooned
kill.
it deep in the ocean.
And I think that's just because for the first one you have 9S, and for the second 2 you don't, so they figured that they would just make it easier.
Hey, 2B,
Um,
I think I have another
but-
idea. You keep that thing right where it is, okay?
The positive is for the second 2 you have a bit of leeway as to strats to kind of make things more consistent.
9S is leaving the front lines. Proposal: 9S should be reported to command as a deserter.
No! He has a plan. Just hold on.
I'm going to see if we can use those missiles back on the shore. But I need you to destroy the EMP unit on that thing's back. Otherwise, they're just going to go off course.
On.
Great music in this section, by the way. Yeah, if you've never played this game yourself, this this part of the game is pretty intense the first time. So Core 2, he's going to do the same thing. He's going to try and take out 2 of these. He's going to use a pod program on the second one, just to make sure that he's able to destroy it before it rotates, and then 1 more pod program is all he needs for the middle. Nicely done. And Dan Flesh coming up to Goliath Flyer, he's just going to buff up. And like I said before, 2 pod programs, spam heavy attacks once the cooldowns for the pod programs are gone, or finished rather. He's just going to use 2 more. Pretty straightforward, sort of like mini boss fight. I guess just one thing that I can mention in terms of experience is all of these sort of flyer enemies give a very small amount of experience, but if 9S gets the killing blow, you don't get any experience at all. So that is a thing that can happen. You can get a lot of kills stolen, and on the first core, it is possible for 9S to land the killing hit on the first core, which is obviously not good because you need that experience. We want to be level 20 when we fight Eve at the very end. So Kanara's finishing up. Grun.
To bunker.
Alright, so he's going to just do some pod spins and then void out, which will place him farther up on this sort of broken highway, a lot closer to where he needs to go. He is going to make his way to Copied City to look for 9S. And then there's another void out here.
However, its EMP strikes knocked out comms all across the region. We're having trouble getting them
That
back
one's
online,
not as important,
which means data uploading
but
is
of course it
currently
is
unavailable
faster.
in some areas.
Where's 9S?
Yeah, about that. We picked up a faint black box reading, but it wasn't strong enough.
So coming up here is probably the most difficult out-of-bounds clip in this run. It's what we call a Copied City clip.
Actually, the commander's already
The intended route, you have to go all the way through the sewers and then go back down to the bottom of the city, but if you get the right lineup, you clip out of bounds first try, plunge down to the tunnel here and get right on the elevator instead of having to run all the way around. So that's very, very, very hard clip. But it's Kanara's, so.
What is this?
Analysis. This area is composed of crystallized silicon and carbon.
What's with the corpses?
So now that we're in Copied City, we get to fight Adam for the second time. Really the most annoying thing about this is that he talks for a long time. I think he talks for about like 90 seconds before you actually start the fight, so what we can do is get a very particular lineup here and clip out of bounds and make our way back to the elevator. It's what we call mansplaining skip, because we get to skip a large chunk of dialogue from Adam. Adam has like 3 sets of dialogue, I think, and we're going to skip the last one, which is the longest one. So when he says "only then," Gnar's is going to go into the elevator and dash back out to cancel that dialogue with the elevator dialogue. Sorry. Yeah. So right when you hear "only then," you can do a punch to get in the elevator. Just press the dash button to dash backwards.
Let us embrace death.
Saves a lot of time. This first phase, just going to throw out swords, as many as possible. We want to damage him down to a certain threshold. Once 2B starts talking, all we need to do is stay alive and hope that he doesn't choose to teleport away, because we have to shoot him one more time after the dialogue's over to start that cutscene. So nicely done. And then this last phase can be a bit tricky. Again, you can easily get two-shot by this boss, so... So, not bad, not great by Kanara standards, but it'll do. So now that we got 9S back, Kanaris is going to jump and talk to that NPC to bring up the dialogue as he's jumping. That will cancel some dialogue that we have to listen to with the commander, which will allow us to go to the teleporter and read this mail in our inbox at the resistance camp so that we can start this long bit of dialogue. What we used to have to do was we have to wait for a bunch of commander dialogue, and we would have to check the inbox at a teleporter up here by the broken highway. So we'd have to just wait out the dialogue, open the mail here, and then continue on. But luckily, with that dialogue skip, we can start this bit of dialogue that's playing right now at the resistance camp. So by the time we actually make it up to factory, Pascal is already there waiting for us.
Building a colony of their own.
You don't say.
Indeed. Apparently it's located in the abandoned factory. I can give you the coordinates if you'd like.
Please.
I was actually planning to go speak with them myself, you know. Maybe we can meet up over there?
Sounds good.
Target location data obtained. Marking on map.
The machines who seek to form an alliance with my village are hiding out here. Still, you should probably be careful. We machines can be rather unpredictable.
Even you.
And now Kanaris is just doing some upskirt strats where you position the camera in such a way that 2B will swat it away. This is actually slightly faster than walking. And if you have your controls set up a very specific way, or your camera settings, if you have the auto adjust turned off in the camera settings, the camera will just stay there. So nice bit of very small optimization, but you're not doing anything else there anyway, so.
You don't have to hurry, so he's going to swarm from you.
And you have to wait for this robot to walk all the way up to the elevator and push the button for you. We haven't been able to find any methods to speed this up or skip it, so guess you'll just see a self-destruct. So when Pascal gets in the elevator, he's going to bring up this dialogue with Pascal. Usually there's some dialogue that plays between 2B and Pascal in the elevator, but if you hold B to talk to Pascal, it's another one of those dialogue cancels. So you get to exit the elevator a little sooner. And Dan Flesh here, what's this, core 2?
My name is Pascal.
The thing about these cores is like each one has like a slightly different camera angle, so you can't even use the same camera angles or like the same joystick positions that you can on some of the other ones. It's kind of weird. Anyway, Kanaris is going to Clip out of bounds here. If you're in a walking state and you hold forward and hold the heavy attack button, you'll do sort of a sword thrust that gives you a ton of forward momentum. That's what he used to clip out of bounds in the sewers to get to the copied city elevator. So by clipping out of bounds there, normally you have to kill a bunch of those Mook robots before you can access the elevator, but if you clip out of bounds, you'll void out and those enemies will actually despawn and respawn, and when that happens, that will unlock the elevator for you. So, and we'll see another out of bounds clip here. He's going to do another heavy hold to clip out, void out, which will open up the elevator again. Factory is very, very difficult, especially this section coming up here. This is one of the harder tricks in the game. He's going to clip out of bounds and plunge all the way down. You have to kind of plunge between the pipe and like an invisible wall. It's really sort of a strange angle. There we go. So he's going to double jump plunge, spam self-destruct a bit, and he's going to double jump right here at the end. And what happens is he hits a trigger that's right by the door, and then he voids out before he touches the ground. So now that that's activated, he can go do a double plunge down here and skip a lot of stuff to get to the elevator to take to So-Shi, which is the factory boss. And he's going to destroy that robot that's just chilling on the fence just for some extra experience. I think he gives like 40 experience or something like that, which is a lot for like an enemy that doesn't move. But yeah, that's actually a really hard skip, so. And then you do your standard lift heavy, jump heavy, plunge combo, which lets you sort of get stuck up here on top of this bridge. You don't actually get up on top, but I don't know, it's sort of, it's a weird bridge.
Oh, now what?
Large energy supply detected within this factory.
But just being up here on the bridge, you don't have to avoid So-Shi. He just kind of sits there. It doesn't do anything until you stop moving and void out and respawn back in the arena.
Hang in there, 2B. 90%. 92. 95.
And he's just doing these heavy attacks in the air to prevent him from respawning back on the ground, basically. And Dan Flesh getting the elevator dialogue, about to start the Atom fight.
2B, I just shut down the electrical grid.
Enemy shield deactivated.
So yeah, throw out a sword, change weapons, throw it out again. Nice crits at the end there, wow. Good fight from Canaris. He got a lot of crits at the end there. You can sort of hear them. They're the sort of louder. I'm not even sure what to call that sound effect, but very nice. So now exiting factory, Kanar's is just going to make his way to an area of the game that we saw in Prologue. So now it's the end of the run. He's going to do basically the same two out of bounds clips that he did at the very beginning. Except here you need to double jump before you do the pod launch there, or you will target some of those robots and you will pod launch towards them. So just have to do the double jump instead. Very easy to forget. So you saw Dan Flesh there. He opened the dialogue and just walked into the commander dialogue trigger instead. That's definitely much more safe than jumping and opening up the dialogue is the dialogue box as you're like in the air. Canaris is just going to
I'm
make
heading
his
back
way
the resistance
to.
camp. What about you?
Well,
Probably wander back
yeah,
to the
2B just
village.
told me.
I have plenty on my plate there.
I see.
Yeah, glass shattering. Right, thanks, CC.
This is the resistance camp.
Say again? I'm not receiving.
Scanning for interference.
The machine requesting an backup. Forces in range. Please, we can.
Let's move.
Yeah, so Canaris leaving the bridge, Dan Flesh making his way
Why are their numbers
on the bridge to the
increasing
factory.
like
I
this?
guess Canaris is like,
Try contacting the
jeez,
bunker via laser relay system.
I don't know,
Affirmative.
like probably 8 minutes ahead. It's kind of hard to say because Dan Flesh has longer load time, or shorter load times. Wait, does Dan Flesh, is he using an RTA timer? Anyway, so in the resistance camp here, we kind of have these like cannibalistic machines. We just have to enter this sort of 2D side-scroller portion and take out all of these machines as fast as we can. The large machines, sometimes they have very long death animations where they just sort of lay down and take a very long time to explode and despawn. So looks like Canaris having pretty good luck. And then just taking out this large biped here. Sort of like a little mini boss. Nicely done.
You again?
Is this timer really RTA? Like it makes sense, but I just didn't even notice. So coming in here to Boku-Shi, basically pretty much the same thing as So-Shi. There's some different attacks, but if you get lucky, if you get some crits and your combat's good, you won't really have to deal with very many of them. And he gets the final attack really quickly. It's just like a vacuum
I'm fine.
suction attack, and that's when you know that you can self-destruct to take out some of those stubbies just to get some more experience before the cutscene starts. Sometimes Boku-Shi will choose to do like another jumping attack, which will send out some shockwaves before he does the ending one, but nicely done by Canaris. He went up to this hill so that that core would follow him up on the hill, which makes it very easy to hit him with damage glitches, to hit him with the spinning sword.
They're still coming? What do we do? There's too many.
2B? 2B, can you hear me? Our village is under...
Pascal? Come in, Pascal!
So now after taking out that first core, he's going to make his way to Pascal's village. There are some machines that are attacking Pascal's wall. They're not really anywhere close to the village, but, you know, whatever.
Damn it! They're here too!
9S! It seems the machines on the network have gone berserk. They've sealed off the entrance to the village and are trying to hold them off, but with these weapons, there's only so much we can do.
Let's take these guys out first.
So then we have Core 2 here. You can actually just throw out damage glitches when Core 2 is in the air and still actually do damage. Canaris, I guess, choosing to wait for it to drop. And doing another partner dialogue cancel there right after the core dies to skip some other text. I don't know, that probably saves, what, like 4 or 5
What is
seconds?
this?
Looks like he's bombarding the area with forced connections. I think all these transmissions are making the machines go haywire. We have to find Eve and destroy him.
On.
Everything must die!
All right, so Eve, the final boss. There's 4 phases. He's going to buff up, throw out short swords. He's going to use slow-mo to try to prevent Eve from using the attack that we call platforms. Wow, nice crits.
What is it?
The energy seems to be coming from a large number
All right,
of platforms.
so from here, what you're going to see Kanaris do is he's going to do slow-mo. He's going to throw out swords. He's going to try to keep enough damage on Eve as he's regenerating that the dialogue will end for the health bar is full. And if that happens, then 9S will sort of hack him right away. So he just got it. Nicely done. Very, very good. So what he's going to do here, he's going to buff up. He's going to do some aerial attacks on Eve here. Hit him with a laser or a double laser. Oh, unfortunate. Eve choosing to fly around a bit, but that's okay. Got him the second time with the pod launch, aerial attacks, another laser. He's going to try and damage him a little bit to where his health is a little bit to the left of the L, and then he is going to do a self-destruct here to finish Eve off.
Alert. NFCS destroyed.
So it looks like he did get it finally. Wasn't first try, but it was still pretty quick. And then we have the final phase of Eve. All we have is pod fire, so we're just going to use range buffs and pray that Eve stays still. Or not stay still, but stays pretty close, because after we do enough damage, it's going to fall down. And we have to be close enough to start the cutscene. So nicely done. Wow, dude.
Corrupted when Eve detached from
So, yeah.
No.
Looks like this is going to be world record. World record is a 124.54, so...
The you that exists at this very moment.
Guess so, but we can't upload this corrupted data
Oh,
to the
man.
bunker. So
9S.
Just casual world record in a tourney race. No big deal. 124.34. 22nd world record.
I want you to do this for me.
That's amazing, dude. Oh, that's really, really amazing. Give it up for Kanaris. Imagine racing against world record.